How good would Heath Shuler be in Josh Heupel's offense? So the options are good, really good, incredible, unstoppable. I'm not going to put the heat on Heath to answer that question, which would be complimenting himself. So before we dive into that, Caleb, anything you want to throw at Heath before we start to talk a little bit to Nico?
No, let's actually start with Heupel's offense since the poll question's up. Let's get going on it.
You roll, sir.
Yeah, Heath. Great to meet you, by the way.
Yeah, pleasure to
And
meet you, Caleb.
thank you. So, what are your thoughts on? We talk about this all the time about quarterbacks that would be a perfect fit for Josh Heupel's system, and you come to our mind a lot when we talk about this. The first question I will have is, how much fun would you have had playing in this system, and what do you think is unique about it yourself when you see it?
Well, having fun, and we always talk. You always talk about the quarterback, but it was, if you even look at the players that I was surrounded with an offensive line that I think oftentimes people forget about how incredible that offensive line was. I think I was only sacked my sophomore year, I think only 5 times. Part of it was we actually got out of the pocket and we moved the pocket a little bit, so that kind of narrows it down. But 5 times, I think, my whole entire sophomore year. You guys may be able to check that out, but it's, I think about 9 times my junior year, which we threw the ball more and more of in the pocket a little bit more instead of running as much. But that offensive line, I mean, talking about a great group, I mean, they were just phenomenal. And I think they would have had the endurance and the ability to be able to, to get up, hurry to the line of scrimmage. The running backs, because you need a true stable of running backs. Charlie Garner, Aaron Hayden, Little Man Stewart. I mean, those 3, I mean, they were just, whoever had the hot hand that day were just, we talking about unstoppable. Those 3 guys at any given day were completely unstoppable with that offensive line. So it would give you that balance and the ability that all 3 of them could be out in space and catch the football. They could be out, move them out of the backfield. And then the wide receivers. I mean, we didn't have the guys that, played in the NFL and had a career in the NFL, but we certainly had those guys that were consistent, that could catch the ball. That literally, when they could get down the field. I mean, you talk of Craig Faulkner, Corey Fleming, Kendrick Jones, Billy Williams. I mean, we had some guys that could really, catch the ball and were very, very consistent in what they did. Ronald Davis was another, my sophomore year. Those guys, and Ronald Davis can move. So we had the guys that could stretch the field, Ronald Davis and Billy Williams, and we had those guys that could really consistently catch the ball and had no fear over the middle. So, I mean, I look at it as a whole. I think we could have been unstoppable in this type of offense. I think, but it would take that type of team to be able to be that way. I think it's not just one person. You got to have a team surrounding you. It starts with that offensive line, like I mentioned earlier.
Caleb does most of the work for us, to be honest with you. I'm just window dressing.
I thought that was the case. I kind of figured that.
But I think you're giving a lot of people credit when you were pretty darn good as well. I'm curious, though, if you put yourself in this offense with this group, we're 20 years old again, because you and I are roughly the same age.
That's right.
How much fun would it be? And what do you see when you watch it in terms of the reads and in terms of what the quarterback is asked to do?
I kind of get a real insight because, when with Navy being there, so I really get a good feeling, and I ask him 1,000 questions. I know when he comes home and I'll rewind the game tape and watch it, and I'll say, hey, now tell me what you're thinking as a quarterback here. And the great part about it is it's kind of like, I relate it to like the point guard, kind of a fast break. You got to make a decision very fast. It reminds me of the West Coast system, that you're not holding the ball in the pocket, so it lessens the ability to take a sack. and then you kind of take that chance downfield. So it reminds me a lot of that. So I had that experience with John Gruden, and John and I got to watch the game. He was at the Tennessee game this year, and so he and I got to sit and watch the game this past year, the homecoming game. And it was pretty cool to be able to sit there with my former coach with the Raiders and to talk about the offense. And he absolutely loves, Heupel's offense and what he's able to do and how he's kind of spreads the ball all over the field. And I think with Nico, and I know that's kind of coming up those questions, but I think you're going to see a more variety of how Nico throws the ball. I just don't think Joe really wanted like the outside. I think he loved the outside perimeter, which was great, and it played into his arm strength, right? I mean, he could throw the ball from one side of the field to the other, and his arm strength that helped. And so, but I think, being more diverse and getting the ball over the middle and underneath, I think you're going to see a more variety of throws this year. But this offense is fast break. You're making a lot of decisions. There's some pre-snap decisions that you make, but you've got to be that quarterback to realize what the defense is trying to do. But he's able to take advantage of the biggest thing about the offense is he can change during the process of a series, from series to series and quarter to quarter and half to half. He can really, the diversity within that offense that allows them to be to make simple changes that have huge magnitudes of success from one series to the next or a half to a half. I think that's why you've always been able to see he starts strong, has a good third quarter, because they're able to make changes the way that defense has done. And in that second and fourth quarter, been able to put some pretty good, make some changes along those ways too. So I think it just really, the offense is like no other in college sports. So I think it's the fast pace. Everybody's trying to keep up with the fast pace, but nobody's come close yet.
So Heath, quick question on this, because I've asked a lot of former players from the 90s this question, so you're on the spot now too.
All right.
Which offense seemed more ahead of the curve at its time? Heupel's offense now, or Steve Spurrier's offense when you watched that in 92 and 93?
Wow.
Can I throw another one in there?
Yeah.
I want to go early 90s. You guys were running Prostyle stuff under David Cutcliffe that a lot of people thought was uber complicated at the time. Caleb, I'm showing my age, but to be able to run Prostyle stuff in college was a big deal in the early 90s.
Yeah. Here was what was unusual, having the opportunity to play with Danny Warfel when I was with the New Orleans Saints. Danny was my backup and one of the greatest individuals I've ever met in my life. I mean, love Danny Warfel. It was kind of unusual because Danny, once he got there, I mean, it was unusual that he had that they would only give them cut-ups of a game tape that the quarterbacks were able to watch. That Spurrier kind of sheltered them away from watching a tremendous amount of game tape, that he gave them specific things that they wanted to do. And I think, but they were intentional and it made Danny kind of focus in on X amount of plays, which was strange. I thought they'd be spending a lot of game tape time. And he said, no, it's very specific to what they want to do. The similarities, most people don't, you always see the big plays with Steve Spurrier as the post route or the corner route, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they were actually reading that when the play was snapped. So it wasn't predetermined that it was going to be a post route. It wasn't predetermined it was going to be a corner route. They were reading that as the ball was snapped. So as a quarterback, they were reading it and the receiver was reading it. Almost identical to what happens in Tennessee's offense, that the receivers are making their conversions. And that's why it's hard for a freshman to come in, and even at the quarterback position and or a wide receiver, because you have to make those conversions based upon the coverage of the defense. And so you saw them. So I think there's a lot of similarities in the two offenses. I don't know who I would give the edge, because that was, you could probably go back to June Jones. I mean, that's a blast from the past, right?
Wow,
go all the way back to June Jones in the offense that they had called, almost every route was being altered based upon coverages. And so, probably go back to June Jones was probably the guy that was probably the most innovative during his time. That both, I think there's a piece of Spurrier has taken from that, and I think Heupel has taken from his offense. So I think both unique, but I will give David Cutcliffe this thought. David did the best job of any coach I've ever seen of putting his players not to fit his offense, but his offense to be predicated based upon the personnel that he had. There was difference. I mean, Andy was a different quarterback than I was. And then the next one was, Jerry and I were a little more similar. Jerry Colquitt were more similar in style. But then you go to that next quarterback, which was Peyton. Peyton was a straight drop, more like an Andy Kelly, straight drop back. They weren't going to get out of the pocket. But you watch what Cutcliffe did. He was able to say, okay, we got quarterbacks that can run. I want to be able to get on the perimeter. And in my sophomore year, when we got inside anybody's still this day, our offense inside the red zone, we were the most productive in the red zone in Tennessee history. Because once we got in there, how are you going to defend us? You had to learn how to defend the option, plus our passing game, plus our Prostyle thing. So you had three offenses that once we got in there, because we'd go 5 wides on you, or we'd get in a full house backfield and we'd go option. How, as a defensive coordinator, were you going to tell your safety, all right, you got the pitch guy on this, but you also got to defend if they go 5 wides with the same personnel, which was incredible. Because we'd come out of the huddle with the same personnel and we'd go 5 wides. We'd have 2 to 3 running backs in the backfield.
So we got an update on our poll question. We made it pretty easy. It's strange that it's brought to you by Boundless Moving with an office in Charlotte, North Carolina. They move me, they can move you. Also, East Tennessee, Boundless Moving. From their 2-hour minimum to turnkey operations, they have you covered. That's Boundless Moving. Just check out Boundless Moving. They move me, they can move you. So how good would Heath Shuler be in Josh Heupel's offense? Good hasn't even gotten a vote, and I'm glad, because really good got 37% of the vote. Incredible, 37% of the vote. Unstoppable, 26% of the vote. That's what people think about you. Heath, nice enough to sit in for Jimmy.
Awesome.
Heath, nice enough to sit in for Jimmy Himes today. Heath, I want to ask you about Josh Heupel's culture, because the term team culture is way overused. If you can give me just 15 seconds, it's brought to you by Varner Ford in Clinton.
Ford Mustang 5.0 GT, 33,540. 2021 GMC Sierra 1500 Denali 4x4, 46,980. 2022 Ford Expedition King Ranch 4x4, 67,550. Ray Varner Ford, your East Tennessee Ford dealership.
Heath, I built a deck one time. It was 20 by 20, a different level was 16 by 16. And I thought, I'll just go build a deck. Well, that's kind of like saying, I'll just go make great team culture. It was a little harder than I thought. And for a lot of these coaches, Billy Napier in Florida, it is really, really hard. How is Josh Heupel, because people don't believe me sometimes, how these guys really like each other. They don't get in trouble. They get along, and it forces everybody to work harder. How's he done that in just 4 years?
Well, I think there's a lot to that, and I think it kind of goes more than just the football team. I think it starts at the very top of the organization, which is Randy Boyd. Goes down to the chancellor and the incredible job that she has done, and Danny White. I think it has to have those three, has to be very important to be able to give the tools and the resources to an incredible coach. And then what he's been able to do when it comes to that football program that he has surrounded himself with some incredible position coaches. And not only do they know X's and O's, but they are incredible men. They literally are, Joey Halsley. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better person to be a mentor and to be a position coach because of the hours that you spend, to my own son. I mean, there's no one better that you could ask for to be a mentor. And if you look at all the positions. And when he brings in a new coach, because of the opportunities that so many of the coaches get because of the success that Tennessee's had under Heupel, they're going to go get other opportunities. He's bringing in a quality a person to replace them too. So I think it's more about that. And ironic, there was a kid that that I knew that was in the portal, and the first question had nothing to do with their ability on the field. I mean, it was ironic. The very first question that I had somebody ask me was, "What kind of person is the kid? Is he a leader? How does he do in school?" I mean, you think that you hear that as almost cliche, and that's what the coaches are really supposed to say. But in reality, that was it. They knew, and I coached the kid, so they truly do want to know about the quality of the kid. So I think that if everything being equal with two kids, they're going to take the quality or the player over the quality than maybe a kid that could, embarrass a university. And so I think with that, that's where he's really made a huge amount of strides. And you got to be successful. And you're going to have some kids that go in there. I mean, we all had them in all teams. I mean, guys that you knew that were just, 30 seconds away from getting in trouble. And I think the accountability within their own team was helpful. If you saw a guy getting out of line, then I think there was somebody able to pull him back. I think, probably a Cooper Mays is kind of that guy with his offensive line, and each one of those. Brew's going to be that with the wide receivers. He's going to be accountable to those young guys and making sure that they're doing all the right things. So I think if you go through a lot of those positions, that each one of those has a really strong leader. I mean, there is some great leadership. I think is probably one of the best teams of leadership. And when you have great leadership, not only from a coach's standpoint, but when you have it amongst a team, then I think it really is a great recipe for success.